Hey guys, I'm Drago and welcome to part 2 of the Zeta virus zombie AU thingy-majiggy. Yay! As I said in the last episode, I'd also drawn Doctor and Emperor Nefarious with this sort of Zeta virus infection from Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. And essentially today we're going to finally do that speed paint. This has been sat in my backlog for ages and ages. But we're finally here, we're finally doing it, and I hope you guys enjoy. Before we get going, you may notice something new about my channel. Yep, there's a brand new shiny join button. After a long battle with YouTube where my channel was bugged and it just wouldn't let me enable it even though I was eligible, finally my channel memberships work. So if you'd like to support me further, then consider joining the channel. You can get fun perks such as custom emojis, members only live streams, sneak peeks at works in progress, an exclusive Discord supporter role, and even a chance to collaborate with me in artwork. And you will get shouted out at the end of each video. So if you're interested, please do consider pressing that join button, and anyone who does, I am eternally grateful to you. Thank you so much. Now surprisingly, despite their more complex designs, I had a lot easier time drawing these two than I did Clank and Kit. Really not sure why, it was very interesting. But maybe the fact that they had so many details made it easier for me to space everything out. I could relate edges to each other and shapes and stuff. Think, oh, if, I don't know, the pipes on his chest go here, then this part of the, I don't know, the circular thing in the middle of his chest can go there. So sometimes I do actually find that more complicated characters are a little bit easier because you can just relate things to their position on the design. And that will help you do proportions and just map everything out in your sketch. But as usual, I started with the really rough general posing and then I moved on to the actual sketching. For Dr. Nefarious, he's a lot more unhinged than Emperor Nefarious. He's definitely what you would call chaotic evil. He's what I like to call a gremlin. He's very much gremlin energy. He's very loud, very energetic, very over the top, very hammy. He's a really, really good villain. Like, if you ask me who my favourite video game villain is, it's Dr. Nefarious. He's great. And so to show that personality, I had him more in a hunched pose, in a very dynamic pose. A lot more movement to him. In contrast, Emperor Nefarious is a lot more regal, he's a lot calmer. He only starts to lose his cool towards the end of the game when he actually started losing. But in general, he is just much more stoic. And so I gave him a slightly calmer pose. More upright and more like he's still trying to keep that regalness to him. But at the same time, the virus has taken over and he's struggling not to just absolutely lose it. Just like I did with Clank and Kit, I decided that drawing these guys in first and then figuring out how to put all the tendrils on was the easiest way to do it. That way I could make sure all the anatomy and proportions were correct on both of them without having to worry about where each tendril is going to go, which could possibly make things out of proportion if I tried to draw the tendrils on straight away. Now, I had a lot more trouble sketching Emperor Nefarious than I did Dr. Nefarious, probably because I've drawn Dr. Nefarious before and I haven't drawn Emperor Nefarious before, and they are quite different designs actually. When you really look at it, they have a lot of different shapes and they're very different, their proportions are different, and it took me a long time to get Emperor Nefarious right. I think it didn't help that I went for actually a fairly difficult pose with him. I wanted to get that slight unhinged look while at the same time keeping the regalness, and I also wanted him sort of leaning back, but it was hard to sort of get that without it looking like he's going to fall over, and it was a really weird angle for getting his anatomy and proportions right, but I think eventually I got there, although I do think Dr. Nefarious ended up looking a bit better than him. Now, when you're lining something that has this much detail, you really need to work on your line weight variation. If you keep everything really flat, it can actually be hard to differentiate different areas. It can be hard to figure out what's supposed to be in front and what's supposed to be behind. You can't really see the depth very well. And when doing 2D art, it is always good to think about the 3D space as well. So, say it with me, kids. Always do line weight variation. Just go back over your lines, build some of them up, darken and thicken some areas, and you can really define shapes that way and make areas stand out, as well as add in that depth before you even do your colouring. And for me, it helps me visualise when it gets to my texturing phase, because I can see where the darker areas are, I can see where things might curve together, where things might intersect, where one thing is in front of the other thing. And when it comes to texturing, that really helps me look at the 3D space, and I basically, I just use it as a guide. And that basically just really helps me know where I need to add the tones and the texture according to a 3D shape. So like if something is curved, I know it's curved because of the line width variation, it's getting dark as it goes to the bottom, that sort of thing. I was having a huge debate in my mind of what colour I wanted to give Dr. Nefarious. Basically, he has two designs. One is the sort of PS2 and early PS3 era, and then the second is the late PS3 era and PS5. He's more purple. Now, my favourite design for Dr. Nefarious has always been the Cracking Time design where he is blue. But considering this is a Zeta virus and it goes into Rift Apart, I thought it actually would fit better to make him purple. Though my other concern was the fact that the Zeta virus itself is purple, so I was afraid the Zeta virus might blend in too much to him. But when it came to texture in the Zeta virus, I was really aware of that, and I made sure to give it a lot of texture, very different to the smooth metal. So you had this contrast of something organic on something inorganic, which really made both the purple of the Zeta virus and the purple of Nefarious' body stand out from each other. Oh my god, I had a blast doing the texturing on this one. Something about shade and texture in metal is so satisfying. And I don't know, I think I just really like drawing robots. Since I grew up doing a lot of Five Nights at Freddy's fan art, I've drawn a lot of robots over time. And I think I just enjoy making them. I think I like the sort of segmented feel of them. The fact that you could separate each area into a bicep, a forearm, a thigh, a calf, the torso versus the head, and it's also clearly separated, that I enjoy just kind of putting that together in a pose or like a puzzle. I think robots and horror creatures are my favourite things to draw. Just like before here, I didn't even have a texture on my brush because I wanted to keep it smooth to show the metal. And for both Doctor and Emperor, it was mainly a case of really making sure each area was defined and separate from each other with how much line work there was. Because if I didn't define those, then it could look quite messy and could look quite... and then to the viewer, it'd be really difficult to see what's what. For their lights, I decided to give them a purple hue to give the idea of the Zeta virus taking over their systems and their coding. The same with the eyes, I made them purple as well. And as for how I did their glass domes, and this is a good tip that I can give you guys on if you want to make something glass. What I tend to do is draw everything that's going to be behind the glass or whatever, and then draw the outline of what the glass is going to fill in. So here you've got all their internal mechanisms on the inside, and then you've got the long curved line making the dome. And then copy the outer line, put that onto a different layer, make sure it's completely closed off and not overlapping anything, and then I add the colour of the glass. I'll then fiddle around with blending modes, but usually I just put it on a lower opacity. Sometimes overlay works quite well, sometimes colour works quite well. Sometimes even shine works quite well as a blending mode for it. Really depends on the context here and what you're going for. But either way, I put it on a lower opacity, and that just creates the general sheen of glass. You can then go back in and you can add the shine and highlights and stuff. And then there you go, you've got your glass and you've got something encased in the glass that actually looks like it is in the glass. And because you've done it over the top of the line art for the inner mechanisms, or whatever is in the glass, then that line art also has the hue of the glass, which makes it even more believable. Another thing you could do is if it's a little bit too translucent, you could do what I did here, which is add a base layer underneath. So I had a layer of colour behind all the mechanisms and everything, which is also orange, which then just solidified it a little bit, especially since their domes are quite bright and saturated in game. They don't let a lot of light through usually. So I had that base layer behind just to solidify it. And if I was doing these on a natural background, I would have probably made that layer a little bit transparent as well, just to show some of the background coming through. But here, since they're on a transparent background, it doesn't really matter. To do was just to add a little bit of shading. Again, since this is just a transparent background, there's no environmental lighting. This is mainly just to add a bit of pizzazz to the piece, make some areas stand out a bit more, such as the lights, and just to be able to find some more areas around virus strands and their parts and mechanisms. In general, just the final touches that will give it a more 3D feel. And last but not least, I used my scatter brush with a small starry texture actually, and I lightly brushed over them to add these sort of flecks that come off the Zeta virus in game. Not entirely sure what they are, but they almost look like little fireflies that are floating around it. They're glowing purple specks. So I just wanted to add that on because one, I thought it was a cool effect, and two, it is part of the Zeta virus. so that is my rendition of Dr. Nefarious and Emperor Nefarious if they were infected by the Zeta virus from Rift Apart. These designs have been a lot of fun to make, both these two and the Clank and Kits ones, and I think the idea of this AU is so cool. The fact that you can have a zombie AU but you're flipping it on its head, so rather than the organic beings being the ones that are in danger and the robots being okay and safe, it's the other way around. The robots are in danger and it's the organic beings that have to fight to survive. Not because the virus can get them, but because there's these massive killer robots on the loose. And especially when you're in a franchise where the robots are very sentient, have a lot of emotion, then it just adds so much more to it. I mean, imagine Ratchet finding Clank absolutely taken over by this virus, and Clank is completely like feral. He does not recognize Ratchet at all and tries to kill him. Imagine the devastation that Ratchet would feel at that. I just think it's a really cool idea, and I think it's something I might try to expand on a bit more in the future. So if you'd like to see that, then let me know down in the comments below. There are loads of other robot characters from Ratchet and Clank that I can make into Zeta virus infection zombies, and if there's any other robots from any other franchises or media that you'd like me to infect with this Zeta virus as part of this AU, then just let me know. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, maybe leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. A huge shout out to my first ever channel member, Hamza Javid. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for you joining. And if you're interested in joining and becoming a channel member, then click that join button down below. And I hope to see all of you wonderful people in the next video. Bye!